Hello and welcome to Renewable English. Our lesson today is all about schools. Now, I've got a genuine, wonderful, real-life expert here for you who knows all about schools and all about making them greener and more sustainable. So here we have John Dykes. He's the co-founder of the Green Standard Schools. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, really great of you to come and join us and share your ideas with our students and, of course, with our teachers. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, if that's okay.
Of course.
So first of all, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Okay, well, I was born in England, in the south of England, grew up in a place called Harlow, which nobody knows. And then I went to university in Brighton. And when I finished university, I thought, yeah, it'd be nice to travel the world a little bit. And how do I do that? Well, I could teach English, for example. So I did a teacher training course and got my first job in Spain. But then I taught in various parts of the world. I taught in Germany, I taught in the UK for a while. And I eventually migrated back to Spain because it was probably the place I'd enjoyed most. And then I thought maybe I should do another qualification. So I took the DTEFLA, or Delta as it was called back then. And then gradually moved into language school management. So at the tender age of about 26, I got my first job as a school director in a town called Terrassa in Spain. And then basically it all grew from there. So I went from being director of school to being marketing manager of a group of schools. And then I became CEO of a group of schools. I actually started several schools myself in different parts of the world, places like Mexico, Colombia, and Northern Ireland. Belfast, for example, is a school I started. And I even started I think what was probably the world's first virtual language school, which was called Net Languages. This is back in 1998, if you can imagine that. Ooh. So that was pretty early on in the internet. So yeah, I've had a long career in English language teaching industry, most of it in management. And I'm now basically working for myself, which is great, on various projects, including Green Standard Schools.
So you've mentioned Green Standard Schools there. Tell us about it.
Sure. Well, it's an association that I started with some colleagues last year, so it's still relatively new. It's a not-for-profit association, I should emphasize, so we're not here to make ourselves wealthy. Essentially, what we decided to do was set up this independent association which was designed to help language schools across the world adopt more environmentally friendly policies and practices. And yeah, as I say, it's all relatively new, but so far so good.
Wonderful. But what was the inspiration behind it?
Okay, well, back in, I think, 2007, I was running a large language school in Barcelona, and I was trying to get teachers and other people to do the typical things like switch the lights off when they left a room, not to waste paper by making photocopies they didn't need, and that sort of thing. And some people responded to it. Some people thought, oh, it's just the management trying to save some money. But I thought, okay, well, maybe the best way to do this would be to try to use the environmental protection card and suggest that actually, guys, we're doing this not just to save the school a few euros here and there, but also because we need to protect the environment. It really is becoming a serious issue. So I looked around to see what sort of organizations were offering accreditation for environmental standards. And I came across two. One was ISO, which has something called ISO 14001. But I came across another one, which was organized by the European Union, called the Eco Management Audit Scheme, or EMAS for short. And that seemed much more interesting in all sorts of ways. So eventually we went for that. And well, to cut a long story short, we managed to get the school accredited by EMAS, but it proved to be a complicated process and also actually quite an expensive process. I mean, we had to have 2 external audits each year, and we had to have a part-time environmental officer on the staff. So although I think, it certainly helped us achieve some of our aims, and we certainly learned a lot, in the end, it just proved to be not really suitable for a small language school like ours. I think EMAS was probably designed for large manufacturing companies rather than small service businesses.
So it wasn't accessible. It wasn't realistic for you to kind of try and do that, which with environmental goals, we should always make them as realistic as possible, surely, and as easy to achieve as possible. It shouldn't be like a challenge where, you have to jump through a million hoops. Like, there should be hoops to jump through, and you do need to be seen, obviously, but was it just so difficult to kind of access? Is that what put you off it, or?
It was complicated. The process of becoming accredited by EMAS was a complicated one. And as I say, it took a lot of time and effort, more than we perhaps expected. But it was also, the expense involved, which just made it unsustainable. So then, this was back in 2007, when perhaps, the environment wasn't such a hot topic as it is now. And then a couple of years ago, when I started working for myself, it seemed to me a good time, a good opportunity to look into the possibility of setting up an accreditation scheme specifically for language schools, because I knew the industry pretty well, and through my experience working with EMAS, I knew the sort of issues that we would have to address. And so that's essentially how it all evolved. I talked to a few colleagues about the idea of putting together this new association, and I managed to find enough support and enthusiasm to get it up and running. So yeah, that's how it all evolved, essentially.
Brilliant. And what's the ultimate goal? What is the ultimate goal? What have you kind of set your targets on at the moment?
Yeah. Well, we have a fairly ambitious goal. That's to say that we want to become known as the global association that accredits language schools for their environmental sustainability. Now, as I'm sure you know, there are lots of national and multinational organizations that accredit language schools, for their teaching quality, for their administrative and marketing activities. But there's nothing that's focusing specifically on environmental sustainability. So we want to fill that gap and say to language schools everywhere, it doesn't matter if you're in Spain, or the UK, or in Italy, Croatia, Latin America, New Zealand, Australia, we have got a system which is designed specifically to help you become a member of this club of committed language schools, committed to protecting the environment.
Brilliant. And what's your greatest achievement to date?
Well, perhaps getting the whole thing up and running is a fairly good achievement, because we had to do this with zero budget. It was all done based on a lot of hard work, a lot of goodwill, and a lot of commitment by people who saw this as a worthwhile cause. So getting the whole thing up and running, piloting the systems, checking that everything was working, that we had this platform that was working properly, and so on. That was all a good achievement. And when we had our very first school pass the accreditation system, that was also a good feeling. That school, I should mention, was called French in Normandy. So they specialize in teaching French to foreigners. And they were the first people to get over the accreditation threshold.
Fantastic. So how would I get over the accreditation threshold? Can you tell me more about how myself, or obviously other language schools, could do that?
Sure. Well, it's a two-step process. Obviously, it's all explained on the website, but essentially the first step is you just send us basic information about your school, where you are, the sort of size of the school, what you do, and so on. That's pretty simple, straightforward, and shouldn't take more than 20 minutes or so. The second step is rather more complex, rather more demanding. And this involves going through a self-assessment questionnaire, and there are 48 questions on this form. And you basically, each of the questions is dealing with different areas of the school's standard business behaviours. So, for example, section 1 in the self-assessment form talks about the subject of energy. So the very first question on the form is, do you currently monitor and record the amount of energy you use in the school? So you answer yes or no. If you answer yes, then you have to provide some sort of evidence of that. In other words, it could be like an Excel form where you list your energy bills or something. So each of these 48 questions is the same format. They're yes/no questions. If a school answers yes, they then have to justify their statement by providing some sort of evidence. And as I say, the form deals with all sorts of different issues. So there's obviously things like, energy consumption, water consumption, paper consumption, recycling practices, purchasing practices, how you offset carbon if you've got students flying around into your school, and importantly, how you integrate environmental issues into your classes, which is obviously something that you're concentrating on. So, we're in the sense we're working in the same field here. Now, when schools have got to the end of this form, they then submit it, and our assessors will go through it, look at the answers, look at the evidence provided, and give the schools a score based on their answers. Now, there's a maximum number of 200 points available through the self-assessment, and we've decided that schools need to achieve a minimum of 130 points to be eligible for accreditation, which means you don't have to be perfect in every single field, but you do have to demonstrate that you are committed to environmental sustainability and have taken various steps along the way to becoming a green standard school. And this, I should also say, perhaps that this initial process we do completely free of charge. So we don't say, we don't invoice anybody for this. It's like offering schools a free environmental audit. Now, most schools that have submitted this self-assessment haven't made it to this 130 point score that we need to become accredited. Some do, because some have actually gone quite a long way down this path already. But most don't, but that's okay, because then what we can do is get back to them and say, okay, look, you're doing very well as far as, I don't know, recycling is concerned and purchasing, but you need to up your game in these other areas. You need to improve your performance. So typically a school would then go away, consider how they can improve their policies and practices, and maybe resubmit the self-assessment once they've introduced these changes a few months down the line, and get accreditation the second time round. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying to schools, this is what you need to do to up your game to achieve the standard that Green Standard Schools has set.
Fantastic. So they have to, it's a great way of kind of looking at yourself as well. I mean, even like I say, even if you send it off and you get 100, you can say that, we are doing some great stuff here, which is good. So we can be happy with that. But there's things, there are these areas that maybe, they hadn't thought of beforehand, and it can just kind of awaken something. Like what I try and do is be a bit more sustainable every day. Sometimes it's something more drastic than something else, but, just try and do a little bit every day. And that's kind of the stopping and looking at themselves and checking, am I really, I think I'm doing a good job, but am I really? So have that whole checklist and that whole kind of guidance as to what you really should work on. Sounds like a really good.
I think everyone who's gone through the process has found it to be very useful in that regard. So, everyone's, even the people who are, already pretty environmentally friendly have, I think, got something out of going through the process. As I say, it's not quick or easy. It does take probably several hours to go through the self-assessment, but you can stop and save what you've done and come back and start again. So you don't have to do it all in one sitting.
Yeah.
So, I think the sort of the benefits, I suppose, of becoming an accredited member are that first and foremost, you're demonstrating to yourself and your staff and your clients that you are seriously committed to environmental sustainability. I mean, lots of people, say they're doing all sorts of different things to help the environment, and undoubtedly that's true. But our system, I suppose, just sets that threshold. You've got to actually get over it to be able to claim that you are up to the standard that we require. So, it's a fairly rigorous process, but it's worth it, of course, because the environment will definitely benefit. And schools should benefit in the sense that, say, their image will be improved. And their staff should also be feeling pretty good about things if they manage to persuade their managers to go down this road.
Yeah, and also the students will gain from it no end. And as we are doing, particularly with younger students, we're educating for a better tomorrow. We're normalizing all of these actions. So what better place to start than in the classroom?
Yeah, we've also
to start our home first, but also in the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, what I say to people is, look, language schools around the world are teaching literally hundreds of thousands of students every year. This is a perfect opportunity for us to discuss environmental issues with a very large number of people, which doesn't mean we have to force it down their throats. And clearly, the priority has got to be to help them improve their language skills, which is why they're coming to our schools. But my argument is you can actually do two things at the same time, with well-constructed lesson plans and so on, like the sort of stuff you're producing, I'm sure. You can ensure that students are improving their language skills, while at the same time getting them to think about, focus on certain environmental issues which maybe they haven't really considered recently. So, and every little helps.
Exactly. I mean, I always talk about the great reach of language teaching. It is by far the widest reaching subject because it does get into every kind of corner of the globe. And yeah, as you say, it's easy to teach the language and something else at the same time. I mean, be it sustainability, be it social justice, social justice issues. It's all there that we can kind of teach alongside English. We don't only need to be going in there and teaching this is a man reading a newspaper. Okay, we need to know what reading is, but couldn't it be a man reading an article about climate change or something like that?
Exactly. So I mean, as well as I do that course books these days generally do include something about the environment, as you said earlier, but it's probably one unit out of 10 or 12, and for the rest of the course it is almost ignored as a theme. But it seems to me that you can, as you're already doing, add supplementary material which will focus on environmental issues, which can reinforce the language that they're studying as well.
Exactly. Well, it's been wonderful having you on. Thank you very much.
No, pleasure.
I'm going to keep an eye on how things are going with you. And yeah,
okay.
So much. And hopefully hopefully everybody, the hundreds of thousands of millions of people that are watching all of the language schools across the world, because obviously there'll be millions of people watching us.
Yeah.
Hopefully those guys can join in and try and sign up.
Well, get there. If the teachers are the ones who can maybe badger their managers and directors into at least, looking at our association, looking at the website, seeing how it works. And as I say, the initial process is completely free, of charge. We're not we're not asking anyone to put any money up front. And even if they do achieve accreditation standard, then it's up to them to decide whether they want to go ahead with it. There's no commitment. It's entirely up to them. And the fees that we charge are pretty damn modest, if you ask me. But it would be great, obviously, to have some more people on board, because these associations, the more members they have, the stronger their voice. Essentially, that's how these things work.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Okay, keep in touch.